but my phone can indicate to the car that I'm here, right? And so the ability for 5G to support vehicle to vehicle and vehicle to other things is a technology that's emerging really quickly. And so from our perspective, we think it's well suited to be able to fulfill not only that very particular application, but also a broader set.
And I think just to close out, the market is evolving rapidly. You have pedestrians, you have bicyclists and all. And so you have to take them into account. And then we will be, since we're defining with a rapidly evolving society, the solutions will be evolving rapidly over time as we do 5G too.
Hand in the front.
Thank you. I wonder if you talk about these in-vehicle functions that you list here. Do you view that as sort of one central CPU to solve all of those problems, or is it a lot of different subsystems? And also, what's the power budget that you have to work with, the power consumption within a car?
Yeah, very specific question for kind of a broad set of applications. Today, as you heard me say, the way most of those functions are being deployed are individual ECUs. So I have an ECU for instrument cluster, an ECU for the infotainment system, an ECU for anti-lock brakes. So the way this has evolved, in order to deliver those incremental functions across lots of different models, right, they're individual ECUs. So obviously, different power budgets for each of those. You know, if you think about instrument cluster, it's less about power dissipation. We have a big battery in the car, right? It's much more about what is the thermal budget I have available given, you know, dissipation of thermal energy. And that's typically what's defining each of these in relation to the amount of performance that needs to be delivered. As I talked about earlier, though, and Doug mentioned it as well, we see there's an opportunity to start to consolidate that, and that will help both from a compute, you know, total compute standpoint and an overall thermal management as well.
Okay. Hi. Two questions. One is you mentioned some of what you're bringing to the BMW partnership with Mobileye. If you could, not sure how specific you want to be, but in terms of sort of what would be running on Xeon versus FPGA versus Mobileye in that vehicle. And then as a follow-on, as we look through some of the prototype vehicles, not a lot of room in the trunk for golf clubs.
That's important.
Yeah, it's important. So, you know, as you go on, obviously Moore's Law vehicles in 2021, you know, your compute capabilities are going to be much more. How do you see this, you know, once the first vehicles actually come out in terms of, you know, I guess the question was power budget and kind of size and compute capability based on, you know, what's probably going to be available in 2021?
Yeah, great. So the two questions, you know, how do you break out the very specific workloads in the implementation of BMW system? Yes, we haven't tried to go and disclose that publicly. I think that's, you know, part of what we're going to do is we're developing these platforms. How do we optimize, right? Each according to the strengths that we can bring to that implementation. We haven't broken that out. But your reference to, hey, there's a lot that goes into the back of the car to be able to support those kinds of functions. Yes, but that's also the beauty of Moore's Law, right? Is that we'll continue to deliver more compute either in a fixed footprint or as we have maybe a larger power budget to do different things, as we consolidate these different workloads around the car, we can deliver more compute capacity. I was talking to one of our engineers just last night, and he says, hey, look inside, I think it was the BMW, he says, look how much cleaner this is, right? And so in the matter of just a couple of months, we've continued to find ways to refine that, and we're going to continue to do that. I think you're going to see that the size of that implementation move very, very quickly.
Hi, a couple of questions on a revenue basis. How should we think of the amount of BOM in a car right now from a semiconductor perspective? You talked about 150 ECUs going down to 50. So how does that evolve? What percentage do you think Intel can gather from that? What do you have now? If you're willing to share, I doubt you are, but that's okay. I'll ask. But in general, how do we think about, you know, semiconductor revenue in a car, and how does that change?
Yeah, it's great. there are really kind of two things that are happening at the same time, right? So number of ECUs, there are a lot of them in a car. We think those will consolidate, but that will go from, you know, maybe an infotainment system or, you know, an instrument cluster running on an Atom processor, right? And so you saw some of the number of vehicles shipping. As that number of vehicles continues to grow, obviously we have a bigger volume opportunity over the next few years. But then as we can start to consolidate more and more of those functions and workloads, the amount of compute needed to support more functions virtualized on the platform will go up as well. And that'll start to move us into higher performance computing. So we'll see that transition happening. And we think that the combination of both creates more and more opportunity for Intel as we put more compute into a single footprint and we can virtualize those workloads.
Do you have a baseline dollar number right now for, sorry.
Revenue target.
Is there
Yeah.
a baseline actual dollar figure right now for semiconductors in these autonomous cars or even in non-autonomous cars?
In terms of a TAM,
For the automotive.
we didn't include that. We can follow up and point you to some sources that will help you with that.
Thank you. What I've heard so far, what you seem to have described is specific Intel capabilities and products that we understand, Xeon and so on, that can be used in cars. Will you be rolling out a specific platform for automobiles where there's a name and there are tailored products or tailored interfaces for auto applications?
Yeah, good. Certainly there are some of the interfaces that are important in these particular applications. So in the next few years, we'll see an interface called TSN, Time Synchronized Networking. We expect that to become a common standard within automotive applications over the next few years. By the way, will also become a standard within industrial applications. So we're going to get scalability across multiple different industries as that occurs. And as you might imagine, in order to fulfill the requirements in these kinds of applications, we'll create particular SKUs of our products that meet the temperature requirements, that have the built-in functional safety capabilities, but not entirely new processors, more of adaptations to our standard products, right? We get that adjacency of the investments that are being made in the data center product portfolio, or we'll create those necessary temperature capabilities within the products we build within our wireless technology portfolio. So it's more about taking standard products and adapting them for the environmental conditions or maybe some specific interfaces that will be necessary in these industries.
Yeah, very high reuse.
Yes.
Very high reuse in, between the two.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Chris Jones from Canales. So you're building your own fleet of cars. You'll be testing in different cities around Europe and the US. Can you give a bit more detail? How many cars, how many cities, and also what you need to do to initiate road testing in any particular state or country? Do you need a permit, etc.? Thank you.
Yeah, we haven't disclosed all of the cities, the number of cars. It's something we're still working on as we continue to evolve our plans for how we go about, building out that level of learning. One of the things you touched on, I think, though, that is important to realize is how are cities responding to that, right? We're having very good conversations with several cities in the U.S. as well as in Europe. Not only do we need to understand what's going to be particular to that environment, but also obviously make sure that we're well coordinated with them in terms of what their expectations would be. But it's important for us to be able to do this not only to see maybe some different environmental conditions, but also different roadway signs, different laws, different types of environments that we'll need to be able to understand. Great.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you all for joining us, and thank you to our presenters. We invite you to enjoy our demo showcase, and we also have lunch at the back. And thanks for everyone on the webcast.
It's such a hard time. What?
You were talking, I'll just the dark, cutting out a different path, led by a beating heart. All the people of the town cast their eyes right to the ground, and matters